Hey guys, welcome back. So this is the beginning of quite a large lecture module on media, and I've broken it down into several sub-chapters, and I'll go into those in specific detail in the next slide. But this first section will be on broadcast media, so specifically TV and radio. And by the end of the entire module, I hope you get a better understanding of the different types of media that are available to advertisers and marketers in terms of putting forward their message that they would like to any given audience that they're interested in communicating with. So this is the overview slide, and it basically shows the 6 sub-chapters that this large module on media are broken up into. So as I mentioned before, today we're going to look at broadcast media, and specifically within that, TV and radio, or as I like to call it, video and radio. Because as we'll see going through the TV section, that a lot of it is actually more about the on-screen experience, whether that screen be your traditional TV screen or your computer screen or your laptop screen or your tablet screen, and now obviously your smartphone screen. Then next time we'll talk about print media, then support media, then following that other support media such as packaging and point of purchase or point of sale displays. And then in the final lecture I'll combine chapters 5 and 6 here, looking at the support media of promo products or promotional products, and then we'll have a little bit of time to go through some multi-choice test questions that'll be similar to the ones you might get in your terms test. So, before we go into TV and radio, I'd just like to spend a little bit of time looking at these different terms, or the jargon that you see on the left of this slide. So we've got various terms such as media, channels, vehicles, platforms. So I just want to spend a little bit of time breaking this up into what I see the main differences are and the different definitions of each of those terms. So starting off with a broad picture, that's media, and the singular for media is medium. So whenever you're discussing things with industry, what you don't want to do is say the word medias, because that doesn't actually exist as a word. So media is the plural, and medium is a single medium, such as one magazine, one medium, right? Or talking through an integrated marketing communications framework, we're using many media to convey our message to the audience. So what is a media? Well, it also comes from the word medium, which is, if you think about it, the best way I can think of it is if you're working with a certain material, like if you're building a sandcastle or you're carving a sculpture, then the medium in that case is sand if you're building a sandcastle, and rock if you're a sculptor, right? So media, or the medium that it goes through, is the method that carries that message. So it's the thing that the message exists within. Okay, and so within advertising, when we talk about media or specific medium, then we talk about things like television media, magazine media, print media, which includes magazine and newspapers. So you can see it's quite a broad term, this idea of media. A similar word, and sometimes they're used interchangeably, is channel. Right, and so the way I think about the difference between a media and a channel is that a channel, unlike a medium, which is just a substance that exists, a channel is more directional, right? If you think about a channel of water, so you've got a channel of water running through some rock, which is the media, right? And so it's the water that's carrying, it's got a direction, whereas the medium, the rock, is just there. It exists as a substance on its own. So a channel to me is a medium through which a message is actively sent in a unidirectional manner. If you think about channels, it's usually one direction, right? A channel of water is the example that I used before. Now, when we talk about channels, often we'll put the two words together and we'll say media channels, and that's perfectly fine. But the way I like to think of a channel is that it's slightly more specific than a media or medium. So the examples I had there is, for instance, TV3, which is one TV station or a TV network station, channel 3. Or if we talk about radio as the media that you're using, or the medium that you're using, then a radio network could be a channel by which you're sending a message through this radio medium. And there'll be several radio networks that may exist, right? But you're seeing it's a little bit more specific at that point. So as I mentioned before, media and channels are often used synonymously and simultaneously. So even in the textbook, they'll say words like media channels, and that's perfectly fine. We probably don't need to get into the semantics of the difference between media and channel, but I think it's helpful to start broad. We usually think about media or medium, and then with the channel, it's a bit more specific, and there's a bit of directionality involved in the understanding of that word. The next piece of jargon below is vehicles. So this is a little bit easier to separate from media and media channels. So vehicles are specific programs or publications which which advertisements are placed. So the best way to think of that are the programs that you watch when you're watching TV medium, or when you're listening to the radio media. So the examples I have there are Married at First Sight or Dancing with the Stars, in terms of specific vehicles within the TV medium. The Fletch, Vaughan and Megan Breakfast Show is a specific vehicle. It's a show within the radio medium, right? Specifically done through the radio channel of ZM. Cosmo is a magazine, so that's a vehicle. Cosmo is a vehicle in the magazine medium, as is The Economist, which is kind of a publication that borders between newspaper and magazine, and Women's Weekly or Women's Day, those sorts of magazines. They're all vehicles that exist within the magazine medium. And finally, this word platform. So this is a relatively new word which has come about typically when social media became very popular. Instead of using the word media channel, which is a little bit more traditional, now you hear the word media platform quite a lot. So in my mind, a media platform is pretty much the same as a media channel. There's probably one important difference. And that difference is that when you think about a platform, it's like a stage where people can go onto this platform, this stage, and interact. And so a platform to me is more multi-directional than a channel. So when you think of a media channel, you're thinking of that one-way direction, like traditional TV media, right? That's me as the advertiser or marketer making an ad and broadcasting it to you. And the message, the communication is really only one way. But when you start to think about social media platforms as a type of another sort of media, then the platform is far more interactional. It's more multi-directional. And so that's probably a useful way of distinguishing between media channels and media platforms. So before we move on through the specifics of TV, radio, and all the other types of media that I'll be looking at for the next couple of modules, next couple of chapters, one question I want you to think about is, what is the sole purpose of any media? Okay, just take a moment, maybe pause the video and just think about this. What is the purpose of any media? So if you've had to think about that, whether it be TV, the TV medium, radio medium, magazine, newspapers, social media, there is one purpose that unifies all of their existence, and that is attention. So attention is what they are all designed to do and to get from you, the audience. No matter what media, how old it is, from newspapers all the way through to the newest social media such as TikTok or Instagram, they all share one thing, and that is to get the attention of the audience. If we use a really extreme old example of an ancient medium such as rock, along with paint, this stone painting, this cave painting, is tens of thousands of years old, and is likely one of the very first forms of symbolic communication that humankind undertook. So it's a crude painting of an ox or some sort of cattle, and you would argue that that is probably serving exactly the same purpose as modern day media. So now we're posting selfies or self videos on TikTok or Facebook or Pinterest or Instagram. Back then, the person that did this cave painting was posting a picture on another different type of media that people could also pay attention to, right? But there is no difference between the intent there and the intent of a person that posts their latest, recipe that they've managed to cook up, right? It's trying to get the attention of a particular audience about something that the creator wants communicated. So this cave person was trying to signify the importance of that particular animal, and they would have made the picture as eye-catching and as attention-grabbing as possible in a place where he or she knew that people would be, hanging out and able to pay attention to this painting. I guarantee you they didn't paint this cow painting for it to remain a secret, right? And likewise, in the modern era, when you post the latest cake that you baked, or a funny thing that your dog or cat did, you're doing the same thing, right? You're trying to get the attention of people because you want them to pay attention to something that you care about, or something that you feel is worth communicating. And so that really is the purpose of any media, which is quite interesting if you think about it, because we're going back 50,000 years looking at this cave painting, but at the same time, by the same token, the psychology around why we choose to communicate certain things that we find important remain the same. And the way that we do it might change in terms of the technology involved and the platforms or channels that are available to us, but the intent is the same, right? And marketers certainly understand that and use that knowledge to the best of their ability in order to serve their clients or their brands, in terms of trying to communicate with the right types of people about a certain type of message that hopefully adds value to the brand that you're trying to sell or add value to. So the TV medium that we're talking about now, or as I like to refer to it, video, because I find video is a far more flexible term, whereas television is a little bit more old school. But in any case, when we talk about TV or video in terms of advertising and marketing communications, it's still highly relevant, right? And that is because a lot of people still have access to some sort of screen, whether that be your traditional TV screen, of which more than 98% of New Zealanders have some form of access to a traditional TV screen. And that's not counting your laptop, your smartphone, your tablet, your iPads, all these other ways of getting video in front of an audience. So it is indeed still the main method of mass communication. And within TV or video, we have this love-hate relationship between advertising and what content we're actually interested in, because often that content is not deemed worthwhile broadcasting, or is not even deemed worthwhile making, unless it can guarantee a certain amount of attention, because it's that attention that is actually valued more by marketers and advertisers, right? So they only care as much about the program that you, the audience, is interested in, not so much because they care about the content, but because they know that their content will warrant your attention. And it's that attention that they need in order to get their ads in front of you, so that they can sell the products or services that the clients have initially, contracted them to sell. So once again, it goes back to that idea of what is the point of any media, and it is to grab your attention. And TV is a really good way of grabbing attention. So when we look at TV, traditionally, the viewership has been, segregated to several parts within a day. So the graph that you see in the right-hand corner shows that there is a peak in viewing around this period, which is called prime time. And that's typically after work and during dinner and slightly after dinner. So if we break that up into a little bit more detail, we see in this table that there are three kind of main sections. Right. So the daytime is when people hang around the TV and they might be watching something, and these days it'll be, on their smartphones or on their tablet or on their laptop, but sometimes the breakfast show is still going on in the background, right? So that's your breakfast viewing. Then you've got the fringe time, which is when people are starting to finish work and head home. And so there's, not much activity there, because most people with income are still not at home, and therefore, from the broadcaster's point of view, unable to watch TV. And certainly, even if you're driving and stuck in traffic, you shouldn't be watching anything on your smartphone. And then the most important section of the day in terms of TV viewing is your prime time. Right, and the time just preceding that is called prime access. So that's when theoretically people are having dinner, and so they're not quite watching TV yet, although we do know that a lot of people do watch TV while having dinner with their family or with their flatmates. But prime time is typically after TV, after dinner, sorry, and people are sitting around the couch. And this is really old school, I know, and it's kind of harks back to the days, you know, when people would sit around the table, have dinner, then go to the couch and enjoy the evening news, followed by some sort of program. Now, in this day and age, it's likely that some of you would not necessarily follow that pattern, but the prime time argument still exists because you will be, you know, having dinner probably slightly before then, and then after that will be your sort of designated screen time for leisure activities, right? So you're watching or catching up or binge watching whatever latest, you know, TV series that you're watching, whether that be streamed or through traditional TV. So that prime time is still important because that is still when people have the time to watch TV or video, and that then obviously dictates the amount of money it will cost to advertise during that prime time, because the argument there is that the more people that are watching, the more attention is being paid. The more attention that is being paid, the more reach advertisers will be able to you know, guarantee in some way. And so advertising during these prime time periods will cost more than advertising during the fringe period or any other period where you don't have that amount of attention. And we'll look a bit later about how they actually figure out, you know, the amount of attention any TV show can be getting for an audience throughout the day by looking at this idea of ratings or TV ratings. But for this initial slide, it's just important to realize that no matter where you're watching TV, there are still certain times of the day where you're predicted to be more likely to be paying attention to TV than other forms of media. So some of the pros with TV is that because it's both sight and sound, it allows advertisers to demonstrate how a product or service works. So that's that audio-visual component, which then also makes it quite good at intruding. So by that I mean that TV will really jump out and grab your attention. And a lot of the ads are designed obviously to do that because they want to attract your attention. You know, they know that you're watching a certain program, but will you stick around and watch their ads? And TV can kind of try to do that as much as possible by making some sort of, you know, either noise or compelling story or visual image, really try to grab your attention and keep it there. It also allows the advertiser or marketer to generate some excitement and also to entertain you. I know back in my day, we used to hate ads because you were never watching TV for the ads, you'd be watching it for the content, and so the ads were annoying. But every now and then you'd get an ad that was actually quite entertaining. Now in this day and age, it's kind of come full circle, and my daughter, who isn't really used to watching ads because we watch a lot of stuff streamed these days, right? Or you have Netflix, and so there are no ads. And so she will actually go and seek out ads now because some of them are legitimately very entertaining to her. And obviously, if you're watching stuff on YouTube, you'll have the ads that will come up before you get to the content that you're interested in. And sometimes you'll have on other platforms, you'll have ads that pop up in the middle of whatever it is you're viewing, right? And so this goes back to that love-hate relationship I talked about, how, you know, the first reason you're on this media channel is to view some sort of content, but in order to make that content worthwhile and sometimes even to justify its existence in the first place, there needs to be this ability to sell the attention the content generates by advertising within, before, or after that content. And so even though it's annoying, it is sometimes a necessary evil in order for people to continue to make that content. Because without the attention and that ability to sell that attention to advertisers, then some content providers would simply go out of business. TV also has a pro that it is a mass media, so that hence it's classified under broadcast. So you're casting a wide net to reach a broad audience. But at the same time, now, especially these days with your personal screens, you have that ability to reach an audience one-on-one as well. So by that I don't mean it's customized to the individual. It's more this idea that they're watching the video content and the ad is literally just targeting them as an individual because it's been placed within content that they know is very specific to specific types of people. So you've got the benefits of a broad audience, but also this ability to segment now when you place video ads on very specific platforms. It's also very effective with the sales force and with the trade. So this pro is interesting. What that means is when you have a TV ad or a video ad, and it's well known because it's a mass media sort of approach, then when an audience member or a consumer goes into a retail setting, or when a sales rep has to deal with another business, having that TV ad or that video ad as a backdrop to that relationship, that business transaction, is actually a very useful tool. So this is an example of advertising assisting with some other function of the business. So picture this. You're the salesperson for, let's say, Dyson, right? And you're working at, let's say, Noel Leeming's. Now, a person comes in and is interested in buying a vacuum cleaner. There's a whole bunch of different vacuum cleaners you could be selling, but the person comes in and knows about Dyson because they've seen the TV ads, right? And so when they start talking, it becomes very easy to establish rapport using the existing TV ad that has preceded that customer coming into the store. So it's like you're not starting from scratch. You already have this shared knowledge and this shared idea of what Dyson means. And so it makes your job as a salesperson a lot easier, and it makes you more incentivized to sell a Dyson product because it has that backing of the advertisements that have existed before the person even came in to see you. And this works the same way with trade. So if you're a sales rep for Dyson, the manufacturer, and you're trying to sell the product to another business, such as Noel Leeming's, trying to convince them to stock your product, it's useful to say, well, we've got all this advertising, so when the customers come into your store, they will be asking for our product by name. Right? And I've seen this happen in my own consulting with a whole raft of different types of manufacturers. It's most common in business-to-business relationships within supermarkets, right? So you can imagine supermarket spaces are very cluttered. There's lots of different types of products, and they're very reluctant to introduce new products unless you, as the manufacturer of the new product, can guarantee a certain level of ad sort of support. Right? So then what you're saying there is that we've got a whole bunch of TV ads, they're going to promote this product, and so, if you stock the product, people will know about it because they've seen it on TV. When they come into the store, they will be looking for that product. And that should give the retailer, the business, confidence to be able to stock this new product, right? Because there's only a limited amount of real estate within a supermarket. And they're not going to just be opening their shelves to any new product, particularly one that doesn't have a history of success with them already. So Wrigley's is a good example. So that's the chewing gum manufacturer. They have, as you can imagine, a lot of different products, Wrigley products, and they're often, displayed in store. And later on, we'll talk about point of purchase or point of sales displays. But having TV or video backing for their products definitely helps to encourage the retailer to take a chance on a new flavor of chewing gum, for example. And I mentioned this before as a pro for TV, and that's this ability to intrude and to achieve impact, and that is built through this audio and visual combination. So it's hitting, two of our most important senses, our sight and our hearing. And so when there's an ad that does both, it's like it does grab your attention, and it has that ability more so than other media such as print. It is a prestigious medium, so TV is still very expensive, not just the placement of the TV ad, but also the fact that you have to make a TV ad. And so often it carries with it a certain sense of legitimacy and credibility. So if you're a small business or small to medium enterprise and you have a TV ad, you can sense that, that pride that comes with, we finally made it now. We have a TV ad. People should take us seriously, right? And so this still works very much within like the sales force, so they feel proud that their company, the products that they're selling, has a TV ad, and so when they approach other businesses to try to stock their product, they can approach it not only with this pre-existing history because of the TV ad, but the sense of pride that they're a legitimate company that has a TV ad, right? So that's a pretty old school way of thinking about a pro of TV, but it is very true, and it does work to try and establish this credibility, particularly for up-and-coming brands. And even the existing brands that have been around forever, like Coca-Cola or Nike or Adidas, they still go strong with these video ads because it helps to maintain that brand image of it being a dominant player in the market. It's the highest reach of any medium, and I mentioned that earlier in an earlier slide when we talked about the high percentage of people that have access to screens. And it is still very much the medium of choice when people tune in to try and get the latest news or entertainment updates or sporting results. There's an ability to convey the brand image and tell a story. It's probably the best medium for trying to evoke some sort of emotional response from the audience. And that's also why TV is such a popular medium for people to seek content, right? You think about all the TV episodes that you watch and the movies, all that sort of stuff, because it's the sight and the sound that really helps with that storytelling. And so when you apply that to ads, it obviously works the same way. And through that storytelling and that ability to achieve impact and at the same time demonstrate how the product works, all of those things work together really well in TV to really build that brand image. TV is also ideal for low involvement consumers or audiences, and that's because it is a medium that can exist in terms of just background. So you're doing stuff, you might be, I don't know, knitting or reading something or checking your email, but the TV will be on. Or you could even be having dinner sometimes and the TV's on. So sometimes you're really viewing it if you're really concentrating, like on a pivotal episode in a certain series. But also sometimes it's just kind of there. And when it comes to advertising within TV, that's definitely a low involvement sort of space, right? If you're paying attention to anything, it will be the content of the show that you're watching. When the ads come up, you kind of automatically tune out. Even with all this ability of the sight and the sound to try and grab your attention and try to, reel you in with some sort of emotional storyline, often you are not really paying attention to those TV ads as much as you would be paying attention to the TV content. And so that's okay still, though. Advertisers realize this, and it's a very short, amount of time that TV ads exist for. So often, even if they can't get the brand image through to you or the translation of their unique selling propositions, they're still trying to build in some sort of recognition through this low involvement repetition and classic conditioning, right? And that's why the sound works really well, because you'll see the logo and then you hear a sound and then you associate the two. So the next time you hear the sound, maybe it's on a different media channel, maybe it's on radio, you still associate it with that logo that you saw, right? And so this link between sight and sound works very well for low involvement audiences as well. Now, what are some cons for TV? So cost is the main con, the main limitation, and that's because it costs a lot to make a TV ad and also to place a TV ad, right? So the example I have there is something sort of more within the ballpark of, your big budget sort of production. So, $400,000 to make a really good 30-second ad, and into millions sometimes, because some of these ads will involve celebrities, right? And so the cost really balloons up. And even if you're a small to medium enterprise making a TV ad and not involving any celebrities, you still want to make sure you do a really good job, because there's nothing quite as tragic as a really cheesy, tacky commercial, right, on TV, broadcast to thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. And so the production value needs to be really high. Otherwise, you risk damaging your brand image. And so the cost is always going to be high. And then beyond that, beyond the production cost, there's the actual placement cost, right? And depending on when you're placing it, the most expensive time to place an ad is the Super Bowl, right? The North American Super Bowl. But you know, even during regular times, during the prime time sessions, it can cost a lot as well, right? So with placing, you know, 30 seconds in a prime time slot, you could be paying anywhere from $200,000. Now the cost has diminished in sort of, I guess, recent times a little bit, because TV broadcasters are realizing that people are not necessarily watching TV at that specific prime time day part. And so they've come up with other metrics to try and figure out when people are viewing. And we'll talk about those later when we talk about ratings. But it's still, you know, it's still not cheap. Another con of TV is this idea of audience fragmentation. So this is a very important concept, and it will come across, we'll bring it up several times during this module on media. Audience fragmentation is this idea that the audiences used to be quite you know, easy to reach, but now they're becoming fragmented, broken up into smaller and smaller subsets of people. And the reason for that is because there are more and more different types of media trying to attract their attention all at the same time. So if you think about the old days, when our grandparents first had TVs, they sat there and there was literally one or two channels. They didn't have a remote control, so they couldn't even change the channel that quickly. So basically what they sat and watched was what they sat and watched for hours at a time. And if you were to advertise on Coronation Street or the news, then you could reach a large chunk of that population, because there was not many other types of media vying for their attention. Right? They weren't checking their Facebook updates or posting stuff on Instagram or, you know, listening to the radio at the same time, even though that did exist. They were very focused people that would do one thing at a time, right? And so back in those days, the audience was not fragmented, and it was very easy to reach them. You just had to advertise during the ad break of the most popular program, which was either the news or some other program. There weren't many options. But now, if you think about what you're doing, you're probably not sitting by the couch watching TV, right? You're probably in your room, on your laptop, or on your smartphone, or on both, and you've got a couple of things happening. You've got a couple of tabs open within your laptop, so you're already your attention is split, not only on your Facebook and your Instagram, but you've also got your phone, and you're doing stuff on that. You're checking your email maybe, and then you're flicking in between all these different things. In the background, there might be a radio or a podcast that you're listening to. So there's all these different media that are vying for your attention. That is audience fragmentation, and TV has suffered the most from it, because it used to be the one place people would pay attention to between 7 and 10 p.m. in the evening, and now its audience is becoming broken into all these little groups. And you know, it's very difficult to guarantee that a particular group is going to be paying attention to a specific medium at any given time. So there's this increase in competing media. The messages on TV have to be quite quick because of the cost of production and the cost of placement. And so these are fleeting messages, which means that you can't get too much information across. And you can't really argue why a person should buy your product or use your service. There is clutter. So even, you know, if we take away all the competing media, within TV, within the ad slot, there will be several ads playing. And then within that, there will be a lot of different stories happening, right? And then within one TV episode, there will be several of those ad slots with multiple brands competing. So there's a lot of clutter. And if you think about the last time you watched TV traditionally and there was an ad break and you saw an ad, can you remember what brand that was about or what that brand was trying to tell you? Right? Really think about that for a second. The last time you watched TV with an ad break, what was the brand that you remember viewing, right? And I think a lot of you would probably struggle because, and it's not your fault, it's simply because it's a very cluttered environment, and also because you're not really paying attention to the ad breaks. Remember, you're paying attention to this medium because of the content that you're actually looking for, whether that be a news update or a sporting update or the latest episode of some TV series that you're actually interested in. People will have limited attention, and so this kind of, I guess, goes back to the previous point I talked about, how people are not really paying attention to the ads. They're paying attention to the content, and even then, they're paying attention to the content only to the lowest amount they need in order to follow the storyline. They're probably multitasking, doing other stuff as well. So their attention is split and it is limited. And this also means that people will zip and zap, right? So you're watching a TV show. This is back in the old days when you had a remote control and you were watching, channel 2, and the ads come up, and what you do, you basically zap across to the other channel 3 maybe, to see what's up there. And invariably you probably get hit with another series of ad breaks, right? And so zapping is when you go between TV channels to try and escape these ads, try and avoid them. Zipping is when you zip through an ad. So the other thing we have to consider with TV or video is that the ability now with technology to download and to watch stuff, right, on delay or stream it on demand when you're ready to watch it. And often with that will mean this ability to fast forward through the ads, and that's called zipping, right? You zip through the ads. Now advertisers obviously don't like that, because that diminishes the value that they can have for those ads that they've paid some very dear money for. So they don't like that. And so what these TV broadcasters are trying to do is that they're trying to stop this ability to zip through the ads. And so those of you watching on demand now will notice that in between each chapter where these traditional ad breaks are, you will still get these ads, but you cannot zip through them any longer. You have to sit and wait for them to finish before the chapter will continue. So there's all these tricks, I guess. It's like a cat and mouse game, and it's this love and a hate relationship we have between the content we're actually interested in and the ads they're trying to sell us, because that is what pays for the content in the first place in many cases. One other con for TV is this distrust. Now, if you think about the last TV ad that you saw, whether it be on TV or as a pop-up before your YouTube content that you were interested in, how much did you trust that TV ad or that video ad? Did you really take what they said at face value and say, yes, this product or this life insurance package or this telco provider is really what I should be signing up for now or purchasing? In all likelihood, no. You just automatically know it's an ad, and you almost reflexively discount everything that's being said, and you just write it off as it's just an ad. And so there's this distrust, and this distrust seems particularly high in terms of TV when compared to other media that we'll look at later, where there is less of this sense of distrust. But when you see a TV ad, typically it has to work pretty hard to convince you to do what it's asking you to do. So we talked about ratings a little bit earlier on, but for the next couple of slides, I want to go into detail into what ratings are. Right? So ratings is probably a word that you're familiar with, and when you hear that a TV show has high ratings, you probably think, well, that's a good thing, right? That means a lot of people are watching that show, and that's essentially what it means. So high ratings mean that a TV station or the producer of that show can charge a lot more for the use of that show, right? So if you have a show that has high ratings, that means people pay attention to it, and because so many people pay attention to it because the content is so attractive, that all of a sudden it becomes so much better for advertisers to advertise within your content than any other competing content, because they know that they've got the highest chance of reaching the most amount of people because your show is the one that has the high ratings, i.e. the high attention. Right? And that also has a trickle-down effect to celebrities, and the reason why they get paid a lot. So celebrities that get paid the most amount of money are celebrities that can get the most amount of attention, which are celebrities that are on the shows that can get the most amount of attention. So this goes back to one of my first slides about what is the point of any media, and that is to get attention. And so in this particular case, when we talk about TV shows, we're talking about media vehicles. But it's the same thing, right? It's it's a piece of content that is designed to get attention through some sort of valuable content or attractive content or interesting content. But the baseline is the same. They want to get your attention, and then advertisers value that attention. They don't care about the content so much. They care about the eyeballs that this attention is able to get. Right, and so we've got one formula there, which is your ratings, and so HH is households. So the crudest way of working out ratings is the number of households that are watching a particular show divided by the total number of households multiplied by 100 to get a percentage, right? And so you're probably thinking, well, how do we know the number of households tuned into any given show? So this is where AC Nielsen's TV People Meter come in. So this is an international panel of people that are a representative group of any given country that AC Nielsen operates in. So in New Zealand, it's probably 40,000 people, give or take, households. And so what that means is that they've got a sample that is really representative of the general population. And so what the sample then watch can be translated and generalized to what the population is probably watching. And then within these People Meter house panels, everyone has like a thing that indicates when they are watching TV and when they are not watching TV. And so they just they get paid, I guess, to be part of this panel, and they have to be quite conscientious about it, and they need to log in and log out when they're watching TV. And so with that data, AC Nielsen is able to say, look, it's 7:30 on a Wednesday, and X number of our households were tuning into this particular show. We know this because they logged in, and we know once they log into that People Meter box, they know exactly what they're watching at that given time, right? And so through that sample, they're able to then predict what the ratings would be in real life. And total number of households, that's pretty easy because that's just the population of New Zealanders' households that have TVs, which is 98% of them, right? And so that gives you the ratings, the number of households tuned into a show divided by the total number of households. So it's a simple percentage of that population. Another measurement is called share, or share of audience. And so this is similar, with the core difference being that it's now dividing the households tuned to the show with those households with the TV actually on. So as you can see, it's a more specific measure because you're not just worried about the number of people watching a show divided by the entire, all the households in New Zealand, but you're more interested in the number of households tuned into that particular show of the number of households that have the TV on in the first place, right? So that's your share of the available audience, right? And so those two numbers are often the most common ones used, certainly traditionally. Now there's other measures that try to fine-tune it a little bit and take into account this idea that, it's not just when people are watching the show when it's first aired, but also people that might be watching it on demand, or people that might have recorded it and are watching it later on during their own time, right? So there's all these things that are happening now that didn't happen back in the old days when these people meters were first implemented. But a lot of different media companies are trying to, keep up with it, keep up with viewing habits in order to try and provide, credible statistics and data on how do we measure the success of any given show, and by proxy, how much can we charge, or how much the show could charge for advertisers to use the attention that those shows are garnering. Right, so the example I have here is you've got 1 million households that are watching a particular show, and let's just say that 2 million households had the TV turned on that evening, right? So 1 million divided by 2 million gives you 0.5, multiplied by 100 gives you 50, right? 50 points means 50%, and that means 50%, half the available audience was watching that show, right? Which is a massive ratings number that you would never normally get. Most ratings these days are probably less than 14%, right? It's very difficult, and this goes back to this idea of audience fragmentation, right? The audience is broken up in so many different ways, and their attention is divided in so many different ways that you can no longer guarantee a large number of households will be watching a particular show, given all the other competing media that are out there. But these calculations are still very useful, and it certainly helps producers and broadcasters justify how much it costs for advertisers and media agencies to place an ad within any given show. So some other measures of ratings, that are a little bit more, I guess, up to date. So you've got the traditional overnight metered market ratings. So these are, a show has aired. Next morning, usually around midday, you get some sort of feedback on, okay, how many households tuned into that show, and you get a ratings measure and a share of audience, right? But we know that people don't necessarily watch, I guess, that show when it first airs. It's very rare now. I mean, I think Game of Thrones, the final episode, was the last time where everyone had to make sure they watched it at the same time. But typically, when stuff comes out, people don't watch it at that exact time anymore. A group of people will still do that, but most people will either record it and watch it later that evening, or maybe even a couple of days later, right? And so some of these other rating measures take into account this thing. So live plus same day means that it's those ratings, but now they're including delayed viewing of that day, right? Then you've got concepts like live plus 3. So this is once again that same day rating, but then they add another 3 additional days. And why did they do that? Because they realize that people, they might not watch it when the episode airs, but they will record it on their DVR, and then or they will watch it on demand, a few days later, maybe 1 or 2 days later, when they've actually got the time, or it suits them. And so this is great, because that means now these ratings numbers can go up, because you might only have 20% of the people watching it live when it first airs, but you have a larger percentage that will stream it later, right? And to expand on that, there's also live plus 7, because you will know that sometimes you download something, or you record it, or you want to watch it, but you don't have time to get around to it until maybe some other time in that week, right? So this is your live plus 7 days of measurement to figure out what the ratings are across a week, essentially. Then you start to get really extreme, like live plus 35. So this is a full 5 weeks after a show. The ratings for a show 5 weeks after it airs, taking into account all these things that people can do, such as recording it but not really getting around to it, but maybe recording 4 weeks worth of the show and binge watching all of it in one go. So there's all these different viewing habits that are changing now with technology that TV broadcasters have to keep up with. The C3 and C7 ratings, these are interesting. So this is the actual number of people that stick around and watch the ads during the airing of any given show. So if you think about the whole point of ratings is to guarantee some amount of attention in order to sell that slot to advertisers and marketers, right? But the measure is always only an estimation, because it's a measure of people watching the content, not people watching the ads that are placed within the boundaries of that content. So these two measurement ratings here, C3 and C7, measure the people who are actually watching the commercials, across these 3 or 7 days. And so this is obviously you would argue a more valid measurement of ratings as it pertains to the value of attention to advertisers and marketers. Okay, because this actually shows that maybe certain shows have commercials that people, for some reason, stick around and watch more compared to other shows where as soon as the ads go on, people log out. Multi-platform ratings, so this is now taking into consideration all the different platforms that people can also watch the same content on. Now, this has not been perfected yet, and it's all very wishy-washy, and it's all quite fuzzy. So no one really knows, how to get this really, really accurate. It's more of this idea that, okay, we know that when a TV station broadcasts a certain show, people don't always watch it on the same day. People might download it, watch it a week later. They might do it through a completely different platform. They might be, using other third-party services like Hulu. There might be a replay that's on the same channel, but like the +1 version. So there's all these various platforms where broadcasters are trying to make their material as accessible as possible. But one problem with that is that the more accessible it is, the difficult it becomes to track. Right. Video games, so we're now finishing up the TV stuff now, but we're still sticking with video, and so I thought video games is another type of media that is obviously very important to advertisers now. So it's a massive growth area. It's outstripping the growth in TV shows and even movies. So it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, video games. It's not really broadcast because it's not like TV or radio where you kind of just send a message out there. It's more about people, paying to play a game or playing a free game, and being exposed to ads through that platform, rather than this one directional sort of broadcasting of TV ads. So it's not really broadcast, but it's got really good targeting capability, I find, because obviously games as a specific vehicle will have different demographics that they appeal to, right? So you've got Minecraft, which will appeal to a certain type of people. Then you'll have Fortnite, which will appeal to a different type of group people. You'll have sports games that appeal to a different type of people. You'll have, first-person shooters, third-person shooters. There's all these different types of video games, and you can very quickly segment to different types of people, different audiences you'd want to reach if you're an advertiser looking to place your ad within a video game. And there's some other really cool directions that this technology is going, right? So we've talked mainly about product placement so far. So there's other ways because of the interactive nature of a video game and the amount of attention people pay to a video game when they engage with it. Like if you think about, for those of you that are gamers, the amount of time you might spend paying attention to a TV show versus a video game that you've really kind of gotten hooked into, right? We're talking hours and hours of paying attention to a video game. And within that, Microsoft Connect, for example, has got some really cool technology now looking at real-time facial recognition and trying to figure out the emotion that someone is exhibiting when they are playing a game, right? So the Microsoft Connect obviously relies on video feedback from a camera so that it knows what you're doing in terms of your body movements, right? And the Wii probably works in a similar way. So there's a lot of these technologies now where it's not just about broadcasting a unidirectional message, but the broadcaster is actually interested in what's coming in the other way. So smart TVs with built-in cameras can potentially also do this, where they're trying to recognize, because of your the attention you're paying to the content, what emotional state you are in. And based on that emotional state, they can send you ads that are more relevant, right? So if you're looking sad, then obviously your mood will be more receptive to certain type of ads with sad storylines or whatever it might be, or maybe funny storylines to kind of break you out of that sadness, right? Or if you're looking stressed or anxious or scared, then maybe you're primed to receive different ads on life insurance or medical protection, right? So there's different ways now where advertisers are trying to turn this broadcast media, this video broadcast media, from just telling you and giving you a message to try and figure out what you're feeling at any given state or what you're thinking in order to give you the ads that they think you want to see at any given time. This idea of augmented reality works in well with video games, but also works in really well with advertising. So if you think about augmented reality, it requires some sort of realization that you're interacting with your environment. And when you interact with your environment, that means there's geography involved. And when there's geography involved, that means businesses within a location-based proximity can all of a sudden tap into your augmented reality gaming experience to offer you products that tie in with the video game that you're playing at that given time, because you're interacting with the space around you, right? And so with this sort of product placement in video games, we can go from beyond just the traditional, you see an ad that you a brand that you recognize, but it happens to be in a virtual world, to actually making the brands far more interactive in a video game than they can ever be on your traditional TV broadcasting advertisement. I mentioned before how video games are a high involvement situation. So unlike a TV program that sometimes you do or don't pay attention to, unless it's a really critical moment in the plot, usually you're not really analyzing everything in that show. With a video game, you're doing exactly that. You're analyzing every single moment in that video game because you're actively solving a problem or trying not to, fall down a hole or get shot at by some other player, right? Or by the computer. And so the amount of attention you pay when you play a video game is extreme. The other really cool thing about advertising in video games is that the attitudes towards it thus far seem to be pretty favorable, right? And that's because it increases the realism of that game, right? If you think about it, you're playing make-believe within this game, but you see a real ad for a real brand that exists in the real world. well then that automatically makes the virtual imaginary world that you're in seem more real. And that's part of the whole escapism and the immersion that happens when you're playing a video game, right? And you want to believe that you're in that space, and ads, can actually help that happen. And finally, there's this ability to reward ad viewing. And so video games, once again, have this, interactive ability where not only are they, they don't have to just chuck ads at you anymore. They can say, literally, if you watch this ad, you get this reward. So those of you that have games on your smartphones that are based on this freemium sort of price positioning strategy, where it's free to play, but you got to pay to get access other parts of that game. Well, ads act as a digital currency in those sorts of situations and those platforms, right? So you've got the game, which was free to download. To level up your player or to open another hidden thing, you need to watch this ad. This ad then gives you points, which you can then use to upgrade your player or play more of the game or access different parts of that game. And so all of a sudden, you're incentivized to watch an ad. And here's just some examples of product placement within video games. So you've got EA's NBA, where once again it's adding realism to that sporting gaming experience. Another example there of a motocross game, GTA or Grand Theft Auto. So often the other way of product placement is for companies to hide Easter eggs or feature their brands in a way within a video game that makes the brand or the product seem really attractive. Right? So you have to do certain things to get access to this certain vehicle, and this vehicle may not actually be available out in the real world until next year, but they're teasing it within this video game environment. Right, so moving on to radio. So radio is another type of broadcast medium, and it is similar to TV in the sense that a lot of people have access to radio, 100%, particularly if you think about, on your smartphone, the ability to get iHeartRadio apps or other apps that allow you to listen to radio stations from all over the world and podcasts. New Zealand, as an interesting side fact, has a very high radio station per capita. So what that means is, given our relatively small population, we have a lot of different types of radio stations, which means that it's pretty easy to segment into different markets. Now, there are three considerations when we talk about radio. The first is the station format. So this is the type of station it is, whether it's a rock station, a rap station, an R&B station, modern music, pop music, classic hits, classical music, news talk, etc. Right? So that's the station format. Then the geography of where those radio stations are available. Now, most of them are nationwide, but you also get very localized radio frequencies. And finally, the day part. So this is similar to TV, where you've got different parts of the day. Now, unlike TV, the prime time for radio is a little bit different. So as you mentioned with TV, it was that moment after dinner and before bedtime where people are watching TV traditionally. With radio, as you might have guessed, it's the morning drive and the afternoon drive when people are stuck in traffic. And so those become the prime time for for radio. And that's when it becomes more expensive to advertise, during the morning and afternoon drive. So some of the pros with radio, it's a very good way to reach segmented audiences. As I mentioned, in New Zealand in particular, we have a very high radio station per capita. So that means for our population, there's all these different types of radio stations, which means you can segment really well. If you're trying to, sell a certain type of boat that people like to use to go fishing, then you would place that ad in a certain type of radio station, right? Alternatively, if you're trying to sell a new brand of organic soaps, then you would place that ad in a very different radio station. The other pro is this ability for radio to be a little bit more intimate and identifiable with the audience as opposed to TV. So TV is very much that sort of intrude and shock, get your attention, trying to keep your attention. With radio, often the promotions are tied in with the DJs. And people build a relationship with these DJs because they've probably been listening to them for a number of years. They get to know about, the problems they're having at home, the latest drama they've had, what's happening with their pet cat, all these sorts of things. So they really identify with the DJs, and therefore they have this almost intimate paranormal relationship with this person that they don't really actually know, but they feel like they do know them. And so when that person then works in with an advertiser and has a promotion that promotes a certain brand or competition or just talks about a certain brand, then it feels slightly more trustworthy than a TV ad that kind of just hits you over the head with some sort of statement. Right? So they use these local personalities with the DJs. Radio is very cost effective, so we're talking thousands of dollars for airtime rather than tens of and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's got low production costs because it is just voice talent that is required, and often the radio station can do that for you. They can do that very quickly as well. So if we compare the amount of time you need to put together a radio ad versus a TV ad, it's like night and day, right? Radio can move very quickly. Best of all, it's compatible with TV. So within this integrated marketing communications framework, which we're using in this course, you wouldn't just do one or the other. Maybe you'd have both. So the TV is the big, expensive thing that gets the sight and sound out there, but the radio can reinforce the TV imagery by using that sound. So very similar jingle or similar, trademark sound. And so just by having that sound through classical conditioning, it'll evoke the same mental imagery that the TV ad had already established. So instead of paying a lot for TV all the time, you do that a few times just to get the image in their head and link it with the sound. And then with radio, which is a lot cheaper, you keep the sound going, but you can still get them to think of the same image when they hear that sound or hear that very similar script that you would have used on TV. It's very portable. So if you think about radios, if you're not listening to it on your cell phone, you certainly have it probably in your car. You can take it along with you. So to the beach, for example, often within stores, the radio might be on as well. And so what this portability means is that it's very close to the point of purchase, right? Unlike TV, which traditionally was stuck at the home. And even if it is a portable video, like your laptop, it's still not as portable as listening to something on your headphones as you're moving around or in your car or walking around the supermarket. So it is closer to the point of purchase. And because of its cost effectiveness, you can run these very lengthy promotions, right? So for an example of ZM's Secret Sound, right? That's like a, $100,000 promo, but that can last for more than a month. And they can just keep running it as a competition and getting that attention because people are interested in who's going to win the competition. So they keep tuning in. And that, once again, is the main reason why any media exists, to get that attention. And radio is able to get your attention at a very cost-effective price. And this means that because it's cost-effective, you can do more of it. And if you do more of it, that increases the amount of exposure that a brand gets through radio. So what are some cons or limitations, weaknesses of radio? So there is quite a lot of clutter. As you know, in between songs, there'll be a bunch of ads, a bunch of radio ads, and so this kind of makes it very difficult to focus on any one brand. There'll be zapping, not so much zipping, so you can't really fast forward, but you can certainly zap across different radio stations. There is no visual, so if there is no established mental image of your brand, then radio is not a good place to start, right? It's very difficult to demonstrate a product using only sound. Audience fractionalization, so once again, they're broken up into different parts. So that means the same as fragmentation, essentially. It just means the audience is broken up. So just because you're listening to radio doesn't mean you're paying attention to radio, doesn't mean you're not also attracted or distracted by other forms of media. There's this idea of selectivity versus generality. So radio, you're able to be very selective. If you advertise on, classic hits, you're going to get a certain type of person. If you advertise on hard rock, you're going to get a different type of person. If you advertise on the R&B station or the rap station, you're going to get a different type of person, right? And so you can be very selective, but you can't reach everyone unless you go across a whole bunch of different radio stations. So there's a balance that you have to have. So when you're doing your projects for Zuru, depending on the brands you choose, really think about, okay, if you're going to pick a radio station, which one would you pick given the consumer profile that you have to work with, given the person, the audience that you want to reach? What radio would work best for that group? And when you look up different radio brands on the internet, they will give you their demographic, their typical consumer profile, to try and make it easier for advertisers to realize which radio stations, or they call them radio brands these days, you should be advertising in, given who you want to communicate with, given whose attention you want to grab. There is a slight lack of respect for radio advertising. Sometimes you associate jingles with cheesiness and tackiness, and so it's not as prestigious as a TV ad done really well. Although in saying that, some of the creative components of radio advertising are really quite clever in getting that brand story across, even at a cost-effective rate. There is more lack of market research in terms of radio ratings. And it is typically a background media. So we mentioned before how TV, you pay attention to maybe the critical components of a storyline during a plot development, but usually you're not really paying as much attention to that as you would be like when you're playing a video game or studying, hopefully. But with radio, it's even worse, right? It's definitely a background media where it's happening maybe at the place of work when you're concentrating on something else. You're listening to the music, you might be listening to the DJs and their latest stories about their lives, but when the ads come up, you don't really even register. So once again, similar to my when I asked you to think about what type of TV ads you saw last time you watched TV, think about the last time you listened to radio and what brands you might have heard. It's very difficult to remember the ads of the brands that happen in between songs. You're more likely to remember the ads of brands that sponsored a specific competition or a specific part of the radio show, such as the traffic report or the weather report or the news. Right, so next time we're going to look at print media, and that includes newspaper and magazines. Thanks, guys.